All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So in today's episode, we are talking to Summit Strength graduate Mary, who has recently come off a successful trip on the Larapinta Trail in the outback of Australia. And she talks us a little bit about her training journey and how she came into this adventure with a few long-term limitations and how she trained and prepared and overcame or moved those limitations forward and ended up having a really successful adventure. I think this is a really interesting episode for so many people out there who may be considering longer term journeys and a little bit nervous about their physical performance, and it is definitely incredibly inspirational. So with that being said, let's get into the episode. All right, hello, Mary, and a big welcome to the show. So great to have you here.
Thanks, Rowan.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this chat today because yeah, as I was saying literally just before we started recording, I think you've got a really not only an awesome story about what you've accomplished and what you've done, but I think it's something that's going to resonate with a lot of different hikers who listen to this podcast. I think it'll be really useful for quite a few people. So yeah, very much looking forward to today. So I guess to kick things off, do you just want to give us a bit of background? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? And what is your background in hiking?
All right. Thanks, Rowan. I'm from the Hawkesbury Valley, west of Sydney. It's a semi-rural area on the edge of the Blue Mountains, but not right on the mountains, more the valley side of things. I'm a semi-retired nutritionist. I'm 60. My husband retired last year and life looked good for him, so I thought I think I'll move towards retiring too. So my hiking background is that before coming to Summit, I'd done 4 multi-day hikes of between 4 and 8 days in Australia and overseas. And I love the experience of seeing new places. I've always enjoyed travelling, but I really enjoyed learning about those places at the slower pace of actually walking through the land. But my fitness let me down, and I'd always opted out at lunchtime wherever possible. In fact, I'd selected hikes where for the most part I could opt out at lunchtime, and I really struggled if the day was any longer than about 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, and then I just didn't enjoy it and just dreaded continuing.
I guess before we started working together and we went through the journey to kind of, I guess, turn that around, help that move forward, what was your typical approach to preparation for these types of trips?
Well, I didn't really prepare at all because I thought that my fitness was up to it. I've exercised all my life pretty consistently, and like I walk my dogs daily for about 2.5 kilometres. And I've been going to the gym three times at least a week for like 40 years. And so I just hadn't done any hike-specific work, just general fitness. And I really thought that I was good to go for any hike until I actually got out there.
So what was the turning point where you decided that you did feel like you needed a bit of extra help? Like what was the specific goal you had in mind and what were the particular things you felt like you needed help with?
Well, on one of my overseas hikes last year, almost this time last year, I was on the 8-day coast-to-coast walk across England, and I was so naive about hiking that I just sort of thought, well, any hike's good to go for, other than Mount Everest sort of level, and I didn't realise this is actually quite a difficult and long walk. But I found on those walks I couldn't handle past the 3 to 4 hour hike in a day, and on a particularly steep part that went on and on, I struggled mentally and physically, and I just really lost the belief that I could finish the day's walk. And so I realised I wasn't as fast as the other walkers because I got too puffed on any terrain, and I knew if I wanted to continue to walk further places, I needed some help. Going on these multi-day hikes, you meet a lot of people who've travelled in all different sorts of places around the world, and I was like really just really wanting to go to some of these places. But on that walk, I just realised they were just out of my reach if I ever wanted to do any more difficult walks. So that's when I thought I've got to find, I wonder if there's anyone who can help me get better.
Yep, absolutely. And when we kicked off, like what was I know obviously you got lots of things you want to do. What was the immediate goal that was in your sights?
Well, the immediate goal I had was to try and walk an 8-day Larapinta trail. of 100 kilometres thereabouts in the middle of Australia.
Awesome, and for me, we've done a couple of episodes on the Larapinta. For long-time listeners, they've probably heard of it before if you're not an Aussie. But an absolute, fantastic adventure, middle of Australia, very rocky, very rough terrain, but absolutely beautiful. So, how good! So, tell us a little bit about this training then. So, when we started working together through Summit Strength, talk us through the training. What did it look like? What was included in the program? Give us the rundown.
Well, there were three things that were really helpful for me with the training with Summit. I really just dived in because I liked the podcasts and thought that they seemed helpful, and maybe I could get all of the information put together a bit more practically for me, more specifically. But once I got into it, as I got into the program, I started to understand what the rationale behind what I was doing was. And then I got really excited that this was actually going to make a difference for me. So it was divided into three parts. There's probably a whole lot more than this, but these are the parts that stuck out to me. First, there was increasing strength, focusing on hike-specific exercises. Before I'd gone to, that's the first one. I've always gone to the gym, as I've said, always lifted weights, and even lifted weights like heavier and heavier over time. But I don't think it had gelled that, okay, if I practice on lifting weights that are going to strengthen these muscles, this is going to make it easier for me to go up hills. But if I work on this muscle, it's going to make it easier to go down hills. And so suddenly it was all coming together in my head that, this is actually going to make a big difference for my hiking, and I'm going to make the whole trip, all the trips easier. And so it really focused me much more on what I was doing at the gym. So the second part was endurance and cardio, and so that I could keep going longer without tiring. So in the past, my cardio had practically just been walking the dogs and chasing 5 kids around as I raised them. And so I hadn't done a lot of cardio. I've had leg problems all my life that I'll get to later. And I just got tired after not too long. So Rowan had me doing a lot of exercises like both steps and rowing, and that just helped my cardio endurance get much better, so I could walk and walk and walk and walk for like 6, 7, 8, 9 hours without really getting a lot tighter. Third was overcoming specific physical weaknesses I'd had from previous surgeries. And so we ended up working a lot on ankles and calves, to the point that I started to think that for the first time, that perhaps the reason I couldn't hike fast enough or far enough without tiring was not because of inherent weaknesses I'd had all my life, but rather because I'd never been given specific training for these problem areas. And that's something that Summit was so much better in than a lot of the hike training programs I looked up online, in that it found out what my weaknesses were and how to focus in on getting over my weaknesses so that I could they wouldn't be hindrances for me in the future to the extent that they had been before.
And then on that point, if you're okay with it, would it be possible to share a little bit more specifics on that? Like, what were the actual weaknesses going on, and what were the actual exercises or approaches that you did to help with that?
When you've had some sort of a physical disability, and I'll get into what that is in just a moment, over time you tend to build up internal excuses that I can't manage this, or that exercise is going to be too hard for me, I can't do that one. And so I had like 40 years of excuses. And I've always tried harder to overcome things, but on my own. But if I ever told a gym trainer or a PT or anything, look, I can't do that because I've got this issue, they'd just be, okay, well, you do something different instead. And that's how I'd always handled it. But at Summit, that's not what happened. We started to actually find ways to work into those difficulties. So the issue with me was that I was born with hip dysplasia, and that was back in the 1960s. There's a lot of people like me in the 60s where it was not being diagnosed when a baby was born, whereas these days, or for the last like 30 years or more, anytime when a baby's born, they do all these tests on the baby immediately, including the clicky hips test, to check if the femur, the top bone of the leg, is in the socket of the hip properly, if the hip socket has grown around it properly. And for quite a large percentage of babies, it hasn't quite got there. And so the babies are put in a sort of a cast for maybe a few weeks while the hip socket continues growing around the femur properly, or sometimes up to several months. And then when they take the cast off, it's all good and the baby develops quite normally and can walk normally. But back in the 1960s, they hadn't developed that diagnostic test in many, many country areas of Australia, and I've seen around the world too, in England and other places. And so what happened was that if the hip socket hasn't formed around the femur properly, it means that the body compensates by making the leg shorter. The gait, or that's the walking of that baby or child, becomes like a skippity skip sort of a walk. And the diagnosis is basically that they'll be, and I was given this same diagnosis, that by 40, 45, you'd have a cane, and by 50, you'd be in a wheelchair. And indeed, I have met a lot of people my age who are in wheelchairs with that exact same thing, or have terrible back pain from walking with a cane all the time. And even 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had to go to the doctor because I'd sprained a wrist and my normal doctor was on holiday. So I went to a different doctor, and he's looking at my form, and he says, "You just told me you've sprained your wrist on a hike and you're about to go on another hike, but your form says that you've got hip dysplasia." He says, "I got many clients like you and they can barely walk in here, and you've just walked in here normally." So I've really worked really hard all my life to try to keep moving, and but at the same time, I would always end up getting like headaches and back aches and leg aches and all that sort of thing, because I just couldn't stop that. So I was always back and forth to the chiropractor, like every 3 weeks. All my life, pretty much, I've been at the chiropractor, and that's kept me sane. About 3.5 months of working with Summit Strength on specific exercises to strengthen the calf muscles, which had just not developed on one side due to botched surgeries that they used to try in the old days for this sort of condition. Something clicked in my head that I actually was going to be able to start to move forward with it. And it's like, I think that's one of the biggest things that's happened. Like specifically, I've got a calcified Achilles tendon on one leg and undeveloped calf muscles on the same leg, as well as a shorter leg. And so I couldn't do certain exercises. So all my life I've been compensating, resulting in imbalances that actually affected the ability to do endurance exercise without eventual pain. So I think because Rowan wouldn't take no for an answer in me doing certain ankle exercises, foot exercises, calf exercises, and he didn't say, "Oh, well, you're not able to do that one," which everyone has said to me in the past. He'd say, "Okay, so let's just make it simpler. Let's make it simpler. And if you can only do like 3 reps in a really mild way, just do it anyway. And or if you can't balance on one leg with your eyes shut, just do it. Just let's make it really simple so that you can at least do 3 reps." And like I was just so hopeless at doing so many of these exercises, but I thought, well, I'm just going to commit to the process and just try to do them. And after as I said, it took me at least 3 months to think, wow, I am actually getting better at a lot of these things. In fact, I found that like balance exercises that were something that I just thought were out of reach before. I could balance fine on the right leg, but the left leg was just like hopeless, absolutely hopeless. I found that a slow and steady approach every day led to a lot of success, which I wouldn't have thought possible. And now on recent hikes, I found that normal able-bodied people many are not capable of doing the balance moves that I can now easily do, because we talk about these things as we go around on hikes, and like I can balance better than a lot of them. So it's just it's been really, really helpful in working on my own weaknesses. And so now, like, I just went to Larapinta and hiked for like several 9-hour days, lots of 7-hour days on rough trails, out in the sunshine, a lot of uneven ground. And I did not get one headache, not one backache, not one leg ache, not one ankle ache, nothing at all. And that's just absolutely unheard of for me from my entire life.
Oh, that's so amazing to hear, Mary, and it's such a full credit for you for working through it all. And I fully understand how frustrating it can be when you're trying to do those exercises and you're like, oh my gosh, this doesn't work, and then oh my gosh, this doesn't work, or this is a this. And full credit for you for sticking with it, because it does take so much just purely for that. So let's take a little step back before we get into the trail and talk through that. As we always say, through any type of training process, it's never a smooth sailing journey. There's always things that come up, things get in the way, or whatever it may be. So during the training process itself, were there any particular roadblocks you ran into, or any sort of like major challenges you faced that we haven't touched on so far? And if so, how did you go about overcoming them?
I think the main two roadblocks were, first, the mental roadblock of thinking that I was not able to do that and I would have to find some other way to compensate. And it took me several months to realise that actually I can work on things, I can get better. And one exercise physiologist did tell me years and years ago that even though I have a calcified Achilles tendon and it's been x-rayed and every kind of ultrasound and everything to confirm that, she said that with very consistent exercise, you can often get a little bit more movement back in it. And since the Achilles tendon is apparently part of the calf muscle, it is the calf muscle, it's just the bottom part of it. That was really important to be able to go up hills and so on, and not just have, in the past I've only had one leg doing the job and the other leg just kind of plods along. And so I guess that getting over the mental disbelief that I was able to make any improvements, that I would say that by far was the biggest issue. And even though Rowan didn't talk about that, didn't really say much about it at all, just the consistency with the exercises, it dawned on me. It became a belief that changed for me. Once that was changed, I felt like I can change anything really if I want to put in the work. I mean, to the extent, I don't mean I'm going to be climbing Mount Everest, but you know what I mean. I can do a lot more than I ever thought I could do before. So that was the first big challenge. The second big challenge was, as I said before, the balance exercises. I really just could not do it. And I think everyone in the gym must have been laughing a bit to themselves when they'd see me trying to balance on one leg for 30 seconds and falling over constantly. And I just, as it gradually got better and better and better until I'd realised, I'm actually doing this. Now I can go up to the next level. And still it is wobbly compared to the average person, but it's a lot better than a lot of people. And so I think they were really big roadblocks. And I said to Rowan at one stage, what's the point of doing these balance exercises? I mean, when are you ever going to stand on one leg out on a trail like a stork? And he said it's a matter of like proprioception, of knowing where like if you step on a rock and it's a bit wobbly, then that you're not going to fall over because your body's used to balancing itself. And and to be honest, out on the Larapinta Trail, I found the balancing exercises were more helpful than just about any of the things that I'd done, because I was often on uneven sort of ground and having to be on one leg for a bit longer than I would have wanted to be. So that was great. That was a big roadblock. I think they were the main roadblocks for me.
So let's talk about the trip now then. So yeah, give us the rundown. How did the trail go? Give us the journey, give us the story. Tell us all about it.
Well, I was actually really scared that this trail would be too hard for me. I'd chosen it because I've never been to the Australian desert before. Strange that I've lived here all my life and never been out there. And I'd just seen some pictures and heard people say just how stunningly beautiful it was. And I'd never been to any sort of a desert where it's icy cold at night and hot in the daytime. And I just thought the whole thing just seemed like a wild adventure. But I was really scared that it would be too hard and I'd conk out in the middle of it and I'd just make a fool of myself. And that's why I worked so consistently to get ready. So first I knew it'd be challenging. The roughness of the trail worried me. Would I be able to balance? Would I get hurt feet? I've had a lot of feet problems in the past, all tied back to the hip dysplasia. Would I fall over on uneven trails? Would I, like by the second day when we were on rocks that were just so jagged, coming up from Ellery Creek, where they were like vertical rocks on the trail everywhere, like not just every foot or every half metre, but they were like wall to wall, vertical rocks on trails that you just had to put your foot on them and walk across them for hours and hours and hours. And the guides actually said, right, take your hands out of the hiking pole straps, because if you trip and you fall, you won't be able to get your hands out quick enough and you'll fall on your face. And that's worse than falling on your hands. And that's how sort of sharp and rough it was. And I was I was necessarily concerned about would I be able to cope with that. Also, I was very concerned because there was no midday outs, and I knew they would be very long days. And it made it clear on the itinerary that you just had to go all day. And 12 kilometres was my longest comfortable walk pre-training, and I knew that I'd have to do 17 to 22 kilometre days, many days out there. I was also worried about the steep climbs. My endurance, was I just going to be exhausted the whole time? Because I hadn't coped very well in England on long, steep climbs. And so in the end, the result was that like 6.5 out of the 7 days I actually found quite easy. The ascents were easy for the most part, and even while many of the others in the group I was with actually slowed down to very slow paces, I felt these going up the inclines were easier than the Summit Steps program, the program that I'd done with Summit Training. Like at one stage we got up a steep climb that we'd been warned about was a steep climb, so we're going to be getting up early in the morning and getting up there before it got too warm. And by the time we got to the top and the guide said, okay, we can sit down now and wait for everyone else to get there, I was like, don't we have further to go? And he was like, no, we're here now. I thought I would have done double as much of that at the gym doing the Summit Strength Steps exercise than this. This is like a breeze. So the exception was the last 15 minutes of an 8 kilometre continual hill climb on the very last day. And like I'd been doing training with a friend and we'd done a half kilometre hill climb, and I said, oh, this is going to be like Mount Sonder. She said, no, it's not. It's 8 kilometres on Mount Sonder, just like this. And so lo and behold, when we actually got there and did the 8 kilometres, I was pretty good till about 6.5, and the last kilometre and a half I just had to dig deep and push on and will my way to the top. But then I was perfectly fine. I wasn't like knackered, and then I was fine to walk down the 8 kilometres back down to the bus again. So probably the hardest part for me was camping and sleeping in a sleeping bag when it was freezing cold, and just coping with all the challenges of not getting the sleeping bag tangled. So that was it.
And then outside of obviously the last, challenging climb that you mentioned and the sleeping bag, were there any other major challenges you faced or anything you ran into out on the trail that you needed to overcome?
I think probably the main part where I really felt at sea on this hike was that I hadn't considered how to turn up my head torch to maximum brightness before a night hike. So I did 2/3 of the night hike with a gloomy half light and tripped over quite a bit, and that was a bit scary, wandering off the trail in the semi-darkness. So just a simple, silly thing like that I hadn't prepared for was probably the scariest part of the whole week. I felt like I prepared well for the temperature control with layers and trail nutrition, which I'd read a lot up on the podcasts and the Summit Strength information. And that worked out really well. So they were my main challenges. But when the hike was finished, I felt sad that it was over, because most days I could have kept going, which was a first for me. But I felt really exhilarated that not only had I succeeded at walking 110 kilometres on a not easy trail, but it meant that with a specific training plan, I could go on to other adventures I previously felt were out of reach. So it opened up a lot of new doors, and I celebrated with 4 days at Kakadu with other family members, relaxing and eating. And then once I got there, I felt so tired and very hungry, and spent a lot of time sleeping and eating.
And then you mentioned that it's maybe opened up a few doors or whatever. Like what is your plan of attack for hiking moving forward? Have you got anything else on the agenda? Anything else you're aspiring to? Talk us through that.
Well, going forward, I'd already booked 3 more overseas hikes before I went to Larapinta, but 2 now look to be a little bit too easy. I could have picked more challenging options. So I will enjoy them. One's in the north of Scotland, and one's in, or 2 up there and 2 are together in Japan. But the third one, it's in part of the European Alps, I can see won't be as hard as I thought it might be when I booked. Like before, I thought, wow, that's going to be a real stretch. But now I can see that, yeah, it'll be a bit of a challenge, but I think it's well within my reach now. And now I'm also able to accept invitations to go on longer hikes with friends, knowing that I'm better prepared to carry more load and potentially camp on hikes in the near future. I feel confident in my own ability to handle hiking situations, and therefore to solo hike, and I've got some solo hiking planned ahead. So, yeah, I just feel much better prepared to handle lots of new hiking situations now.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that's so good to hear. And in all honesty, as I think I said to you the other day, I really do think like the world's your oyster, in regards to hiking, in the sense that, you've shown what you can accomplish on the Larapinta, and there's just so much out there which is, so within your reach. So it's going to be super interesting to see, what you end up doing, in the journey ahead. So I guess for anyone listening to this today, and they were like, you know what, I have been thinking about the Larapinta for a while. It has been on my list, and maybe I am thinking about what I'd like to do. If anyone was considering this particular adventure, what advice would you give them?
Whatever weaknesses you have that stop you hiking to amazing places that are not reachable by road, that there is help available to either overcome weaknesses or find ways around them in many cases, as long as you're willing to put in some consistent effort for 12 to 16 weeks to prepare. And the interesting thing was that the actual program that I did with Summit, it was not like this really grueling training program. It started from where I was at and gradually worked up, so that it didn't feel like I was really doing much more, just being consistent and continuing turning up.
From my side of things, it was such a pleasure having you on board, the whole journey. And it's been so good having you to talk through a little bit on this podcast today, because as I said before, I think, a lot of people listening may very well resonate with what you've been talking about today and find it, quite useful. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to share this and give us some insight. So I guess before we do, wrap things up for today, and I'll let you get on with your day. Was there anything else that we kind of missed in the podcast, or anything else you'd like to potentially add, or anything like that?
Yes, I think so. First of all, if you are thinking of coming along to Summit Strength, first of all, and I've talked to many people about this, about Summit, so I know the sort of issues that people bring up, or they brought up with me. First of all, the cost of it. If you're Australian, it just seems a lot of money because it's in American dollars, and most people are like, "Whoa, would you pay that much?" But when I sat down and thought about it, that paying for a 3.5 day guided walk, which if you're not an experienced hiker, you probably will be taking a guided walk to start with at least. That's what you might be paying for 16 weeks, and yet you're going to be gaining like advice and specific help that you're going to be able to use for like potentially years or decades to come. And so really when you look at it in the light of 3 days of a guided walk, that's not very much. It's very, to me, when I thought of it like that, it was quite very, very worthwhile. The next thing is that like Summit works a bit differently to like a personal trainer in that it's all an online app system. You don't meet up with the trainer. I've never met Rowan at all or any of the staff and the other people because there's a number of the team members. So at first I thought, I wonder how this is going to work because I've joined up with many online things before and some are better than others. But this actually works better, or I thought it worked better than face-to-face because we had a Zoom at specific junctures in the training and communicated via the app with Monday to Friday support, and was sent a lot of information that was specific to my questions, to like quick little videos at 3 or 4 minutes that would answer my question a bit more fully. And also the other thing I really liked about Summit, and I have tried other programs to get fitter in different areas, but including hiking actually, that just didn't work for me, but Summit did work, was because first of all, Rowan found out what my schedule was and what my exercise program already was and fitted it in around, somehow it could fit into there and make a hike specific plan to fit inside my current schedule. So all I ended up altering was going to the gym half an hour earlier on the 3 days of the week I already went, and adding one hike on the weekend. And when I was at the gym, I altered some of the exercises I was doing to Summit's recommendations and cut out some others which didn't help with hiking. And otherwise my life looked pretty much the same. And I mean, that is so helpful, because if you have to make like some massive change where you're having to get up like 3 hours earlier, which I know some hiking programs, you have to link up with the people living in another state or even another country in order to be a part of the exercise program. After a while, it's really hard to keep that kind of thing up. And this just fitted inside my own schedule, and so it was not difficult to keep going for the long run. So I'm just thinking that I just want to say that Summit, just the way it runs, it will really help with success. So it's really worth giving it a go.
I love to hear that. And I just want to say again, Mary, like, you know, thank you so much for being a part of all this. Obviously being a part of the training journey and helping me, you know, contribute in my small way, but also coming on and, you know, sharing all of this and talking through it. And I think it's going to be, super useful for a lot of people. So thank you so much once again for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. And really looking forward to seeing all the adventures in the months and years ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on.
So there we go, guys. I really do hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I really do hope you got some good insight and hope this story resonates with a few hikers out there. Last thing I will sort of say coming off the back of today, if anyone was interested in learning a little bit more about the training program that Mary used to prepare for her adventure, what you can do is you can go to summitstrength.com.au/online. Now, on that page, there's a big video which talks about this particular program, explains what it's all about, what's included, and if it does sound like something you would want to explore a bit more, have a bit of a conversation about, there is a link on that page where you can book a free call with our team. We can have a bit of a chat, learn about you, your training, your hiking, your aspirations, and any limitations you may have, and see if and how we may be able to help you out. The call is completely free, so if you were interested, feel free to book on. We can have a bit of a chat and take it from there. So you can check it out at summitstrength.com.au/online. But aside from that, thank you so much for listening. I really do hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye.